Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us here at our kickoff event for our AAPI Heritage Month with AAVMP, our webinar series. Our first webinar is going to be talking about sort of the work-life balance between vet med and parenting. And so, Daniel, if you could advance the slide. We did want to make a few announcements before we got started, and one is that we still do have a couple of positions open at AAVMP if any of you all are interested in applying. Our president-elect position, which is a one-year position as president-elect, underneath me, your president, in order to train to become president for a year and then become immediate past president. There's also a directorship position in mentorship and leadership that is open, and that is a 2-year term on the board of directors. And you can get more information through that QR code. If you stick around with us, there will be a raffle at the end to participate in a post-seminar survey, as well as getting a chance to win a gift card for $100 from Figs. So everyone seems to love Figs. I've never worn Figs, but I've heard they're all the rage. So stick around so you can get that QR code. All right. So I am your moderator today. My name is Kaori Sakamoto. I am an anatomic pathologist. I did my veterinary degree at North Carolina State University, go Wolfpack, did my residency in pathology at Purdue, my PhD at Cornell, and I've been working at the University of Georgia for the last 15 years. I'm currently the president of AVMP. Grace, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Grace Lai. I'm from Taiwan. I was born and raised in Taiwan. I went to vet school in Taiwan. And then afterwards, I was a GP for 5 years trying to save money and budget, and then while studying English. Then I did my SAVG in Illinois, did my rotated internship in VCA in Maryland, did my specialty internship in Michigan State University, and then I did my residency in the University of Georgia. Right now, I'm the adjunct professor at City University of Hong Kong.
Thank you. Clara?
Hi, everyone. I'm Clara Goh. I'm a faculty orthopedic surgeon at Colorado State University. I actually grew up and did my vet school in Sydney, Australia, and came over and essentially did all my postgrad training at CSU internship surgery residency. I did a 1-year surgical oncology fellowship and then stayed on as orthopedic faculty. And I have a two and a few year old daughter. So fairly new to the motherhood scene as far as that goes. I'm really excited to be part of this panel discussion.
And last but not least, Yui. Are you muted?
That's a rookie mistake. I should know better by this point. It's 2024, not 2020. Hi again. I'm Yui Shapard. I was born and raised in Tokyo, Japan. Went to an international school in Yokohama, and then went to vet school at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, UK. After my vet school, I went into an internship at the ASPCA. Since in the beginning, shelter medicine was a passion of mine. Since in vet school, we founded a nonprofit free veterinary clinic with two of my friends in the same year as myself. I've been in general practice after my internship for about 6 years total at this point, and did a 1-year stint working as a medical director for a telehealth startup. Currently, I'm working per diem, relief work part-time while trying to raise a soon-to-be 1-year-old daughter.
Thank you. And I just realized that Grace and I didn't really talk about our parenthood.
Yeah, I forgot.
You want to go first?
Yes, I have 2 kids. I have a 6-year-old boy and a 6-month-old baby girl.
And I have an 18-year-old son who is on his way to prom right now. So I'm at the very tail end of the parenthood thing. But I very much did have to balance everything as a person going through tenure track in academia. So, all right.
You, I'm
Go
so
ahead,
sorry
Danielle.
about mispelling your name. So sorry
Oh,
about
that's
that.
okay. That's okay. I care more about my first name than my last name.
Okay.
All right. So the first question that we have for you all, and I guess I'll start with Yui, is how you feel your heritage sort of informed your perspective and your approach to both parenting and working. Like, how do you feel that influenced you?
Yeah, I was thinking about this a lot today while I was working, actually. And I think for me, a big part was in Japan, where I grew up, it's pretty normal for the birthing parent, which is usually, a woman, to take a year off from work and then go back to work full time. And it's very accepted, and if anything, it's encouraged. Unlike here in the US, where, there's really no system that allows you to take an entire year off. And on top of that, even though my mother, who's fully Japanese, raised me to be very sort of forward thinking and progressive in the mindset of, being independent and making my own money and, having my own career, the rest of my family, this is all about balancing if you can hear my baby crying in the background. The rest of my family is quite conservative in the gender role. And so there was definitely a part of me when I got pregnant with my current daughter, Marley, where I kind of struggled with the idea of being a full-time mom, even in the beginning, and sort of putting my career on hold, just because I grew up not wanting to be like the rest of my family, and because I wanted to be this like liberal, empowered, I can do anything and I can be a mom and also be an awesome, successful veterinarian at the same time. But I will say it was easier for me mentally to take on this idea of, what, the first year or two of my life, I'm just going to focus on my daughter, and that's totally fine. And there's probably less guilt for me than there probably would be for somebody who was raised in the US or raised in a society where taking, an extended time off is seen as somehow negative. Yeah, I think that's kind of where my mindset's at.
Thank you. How about you, Clara?
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think especially, I grew up in Australia, but my parents are from Singapore and Malaysia. And they were first generation immigrants to Australia. Both of them are also human doctors, and I have one sister who is also a human doctor. So I was kind of the black sheep of the family, being a veterinarian to begin with. But I think also, that had a heavy influence on me, my Asian heritage, in terms of just, I think I've always had that little bit of the work ethic drummed into me, of always needing to not only be a hard worker, but to, achieve good grades and then excel at whatever career that you're doing. And I think that definitely when I got pregnant, and I'm a little, I guess, late in the game, a little older in terms of a mother, I think I definitely had to reteach myself just that it was okay. It's okay to focus on something other than my work, other than my career. That doesn't define me as who I am as a person. And, I really embraced becoming a mum, which I think definitely was a little challenging, and I'm glad to be part of this discussion, hoping to pick up a few tips from the rest of everybody here. But I think definitely realizing that your identity is not necessarily focused around your career was a big change or a big shift for me.
Thank you. How about you, Grace?
I would second that. I was born and raised in Taiwan, and even right now, like, and I go by Grace, but my Chinese name is Pei Chen. To translate that into Chinese, it means that I find a good guy and get married. So that's a blessing from my parents gave me. So my whole life, the societal expectation for girls, at least in Taiwan, was to get married and be supportive for their husband, their kids, and the families. So most women lost their identification along the way because they become, because they're expected to give up their career for marriage and parenthood, even they have talent or potential. So I growing up in a environment that there's no sense of work-life balance, because as being a mom or being a wife, you should give up your job. And my mom, she's a housewife. She's a like stay-at-home mom. I can see that she isn't completely happy, or maybe she's not happy at all because she doesn't have financial independence. Maybe because of that, I'm the oldest child. I have two younger sisters. I see my mom like struggle sometime because my dad is always at work outside. So I feel like, okay, I definitely don't want to be like that when I grow up. And so when I was pregnant with my first baby, my son, I was interviewing, flying everywhere in the state for my residency. And I was very fortunate. I got accepted at a match with University of Georgia, but he was born right before my first year residency. So definitely it was not easy, because trying to handle a newborn and being a fresh resident and then the stress and the life. But I knew that that's just temporary. And then just like, you need to gut through it. I think that being the Asian, like we have that, spirit or like momentum. We know that we're going to like handle it and then just get through it. So, and right now, I'm here. I didn't give up my dream, and then I'm also very lucky to be a mom.
But I think being Asian often means that we have trouble asking for help. Did you feel like you could ask your colleagues for help during your residency, Grace, or faculty if you needed it?
Yes. Yeah, they're very supportive.
That's good. That's good. So my story is a little bit different because my parents were both professionals. My parents were both dentists and PhDs, which is my mother was very ahead of her time in that sense. But because they came to America before I was born and they were in the same field, if my mother had pursued her passion and her career, they would have had to compete for grants, basically. So my mom ended up working for my dad, which I can't even imagine how hard that must have been, because I'd probably kill my husband if I had to work for him. For those of you who know my husband. I do love him dearly, by the way. I'm just joking. But so she had to completely, sort of give up her career dreams and all of her education to just be a lab supervisor for him. And so I grew up watching that, and I very much never wanted that. And so I very much prioritized my career and making sure that I got into a relationship, a marriage where my partner was absolutely 50-50, respected my career and my wishes. And we would always collaborate and compromise on wherever we went for our jobs and that sort of thing. So that was extremely important to me when finding a partner. So but the Asian workaholism was definitely very strong. In my early tenure track days, before I got tenure, I worked, probably like 80-hour weeks, but all of that was self-inflicted. Like nobody told me I had to do that. Nobody, put that pressure on me. It was just that voice in my head, my dad's voice pretty much, nagging me all the time. And so I did not have the work-life balance down at all, pre-tenure. So it was after I got through the tenure process and I realized that I could not sustain this pace. I mean, I was sick all the time. I was overweight. I was not exercising. I was not eating right. And I completely turned my life around 180 degrees, just started taking care of myself. And as a result, I took better care of my kid, my husband, and everything just fell into place once I gave myself oxygen first. So yeah, big deal for me.
I really resonate with what you just said about taking care of yourself first before you could take care of others. And I had this exact conversation with a mother friend of mine as well, who has a 3-month-old. So she's really in the deep end of things right now. And I think the capacity to be able to really kind of push yourself hard is very dependent on the person, even within the Asian community where people were all tend to kind of be conditioned to push yourselves further. Especially if you're an Asian American immigrant or Asian Australian immigrant, I feel like that need to prove yourself is probably stronger as well. Or if you're from somewhere like Taiwan or Japan, where if you're a woman or you're, female presenting, then you also need to prove yourself your worth as well. But I remember this is before I even had a baby, before I was even married, but during my internship, and that was just a 1-year internship. It just did not work for me at all. And I remember having a panic attack and an emotional meltdown during my emergency rotation, had to go to the bathroom and just lock myself in there for 5 minutes. It felt like 30 minutes, but it was actually just 5 minutes where I just need to calm down and breathe. And I think at that point, that was already my breaking point. And there's a part of me that feels a little ashamed to talk about it because it's like, oh, you were only out for 10 months and you already had a mental breakdown. You're so weak. That's sort of the internal dialogue I have in my head. But over the years, I've come to realize that the capacity my cup was just completely full and about to break. I was living in a city where I knew nobody. My family was nowhere around me. I didn't have any friends because I had just moved to New York City, and New York City itself is such a monster of a place to live. And I think that experience actually helped me as I became a mom, that I need to, if I don't take care of my needs first, I'm not going to be a good parent for my daughter, and I'm not going to be a good partner for my husband, and I'm not going to be able to do the work that I do in my career. I'm not going to be able to take care of the patients or be a good colleague, on and on. So I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Yui. Clara or Grace, did you want to add anything to that before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I agree that earlier Dr. Sakamoto said that it's very vital to find a supportive significant other. That my husband and I, we had numerous discussion about like my career and then the goal of my life, and then he's fully supportive. And I remember that at the beginning of my second year, he said that, Grace, I know you want to be academic surgeon, and I know that if you stay in the United States, that you will have like a lot better outcome for your career development, but I really need you to start thinking you need to move back to Asia for our family. So, because to be honest, like pursuing residency is one of the most selfish thing in the world. Because I mean, I do that, but the rest of the people who love me, the life of being putting on hold. So I kind of prep myself for that. And after I finished my training, I moved back to Taiwan, and then I realized there's no job available. Of course, that there was some struggle. And also I'm a baby surgeon, I need mentorship. I mean, because I'm the only surgeon specialist in the whole country, and then they will come to me. So that was that kind of really the pressure and the stress. But I also think that it is very important because to readjust the priority, because right now I've done the period how I pursue my goal and my career, and right now I put my family at top, and right now it's time for me to be in the backstage to support my husband, for him to really invest on his career.
It's definitely a 50-50 back and forth sort of thing. Clara, did you have anything you wanted to add before we moved on?
Yeah, I mean, I think, or I would definitely echo what everybody's thoughts and statements have been about not being afraid, to ask for help, and also just admitting that, we're all at times, we're very fragile. When I think a big challenge for me was, luckily when I became a mom, I already had a pretty established career. But what I struggled with was the pregnancy part. I had focused on career for so long, I probably left it too late. And just like many women out there who are definitely, approaching, parenthood later in life, it's not easy. And, I struggled when I guess I struggled with fertility and whatnot. And I think having a strong support network, having people that I could lean on and could understand, definitely helped me through, that tough stretch of time. But I think needing to accept, that help was not easy coming from, Asian background. Again, it's always that, I need to put my best face forward and always present this really strong front. But at times just admitting that, I'm not unbreakable and, sometimes I need help.
That is actually a great segue to our first question from our audience. So from Jess, did you all feel like putting your career first made you put off having children later? Or if you feel like you had children later, and any pressure from the family to have children? Does anybody else want to take this one?
Yeah, I definitely put off even thinking about having kids until I felt more established. And honestly, I kind of went back and forth on whether I even wanted to have kids, because I had all these logical reasons not to. And then I think after I met my now husband, and then, we worked out the little kinks in our relationship to an extent. And then I started to feel more comfortable in the position that I was in at work. I think that was when I started to feel comfortable planning to have a family. And I fortunately didn't have any pressure to have to have children from my own family. My mom, if anything, was the one who was like, oh, you shouldn't have kids because kids is just going to be really expensive and difficult and you're going to struggle and you should just focus on building a career and helping me retire and have a good life anyways. My grandmother on my mom's side, who's very conservative and very much, she's like 90-year-old, so she thinks a woman's place is in the kitchen behind a man. She knew who I was and who my mother was trying to raise, so she probably wanted me to have kids from when I was in my 20s, but she fortunately never said anything to my face. So yeah, I was lucky in that I didn't have that kind of pressure.
How about you, Grace?
I'm completely opposite. My mom was like, why are you not getting married? And then your eggs are expiring, and then and because of that, I broke up with my boyfriend. Right now he's the husband. We broke up, and then my mom said, well, you already got your American taste, the taste of your American dream. Why don't you just come back home and then be like me, be a housewife, be a stay-at-home mom? And then because my mom, my auntie, my grandmom, they're all like stay-at-home moms, so they couldn't understand what I'm doing. And I definitely got the pressure, especially when I got pregnant. Because before I was pregnant, before Bryden was born, I had 2 miscarriages. Is that too much to share? And so of course that for for more conservative parents' standpoint, they say, oh, that's because you work too hard, because like your body cannot sustain that. Then that means that you need to like give up that and then just like go back home, take those like herbal medicine, Chinese medicine thing, and to like, be ready for your uterus, etc. So when I was pregnant with my son, I got a lot of pressure from my mom, said that you should give up your residency interview because your body cannot handle it, flying back and forth, etc. But I'm relatively like strong-minded. I think that I just don't want to be like my mom, like being so unhappy without having her own identity, my own identity. So yeah.
Yeah, I was more in Yui's camp. I think my parents both, they had me in their 30s, so there wasn't a ton of pressure to have one earlier. My only regret of not having Miss Ao earlier, that's my son, is that my mother had passed from colon cancer the year before he was born, so they never got to meet. So I am very sad about that. But I waited until I was 35 to have him, and the part of me that's glad is I was in my PhD at the time and I was writing my dissertation. So there's never a good time, right, to have a kid. But it was a relatively okay time, I guess, given all perspectives. But I don't think I would have had the endurance and the patience to be a good mom if I had had him in my 20s. I just wasn't mature enough. So in that sense, I'm glad I waited. Clara, did you have anything else you wanted to add? You already sort of touched on this subject a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's from my perspective, I think if there was one thing I could maybe think about doing would be maybe trying to have a family earlier. It wasn't quite probably in the right mindset though. I think it's one of those things as a woman who wants a career, you kind of focus on your career, and you put the family thing off. Oh, it's not the right time because I'm doing this. It's not the right time because I'm doing that. And I also wasn't maybe in a great relationship at the time when I was younger to also feel like I could have the support of like a good partner or husband in order to have a family either. So, but yeah, if I had one regret, it would have been nice, to have not gone through all the fertility struggles and whatnot, which I think if I had been a little bit younger, perhaps that would have been a little easier, but nothing's guaranteed, obviously. But yeah, I mean, from a family pressure perspective, I did have some pressure from my family wanting me to have a family. I have one older sister. She doesn't have any children. So my daughter is the only, granddaughter for my parents. So they definitely put some pressure on me for quite some years to think about having a family.
And is there anyone else who minds sharing how old you were when you had your first child? That was
Yeah,
like the question from Jess.
I was 37, so it was last year in May, and I had just turned 37 when I had my daughter.
I was 35.
Thank you.
45 for me.
Okay, so the next question comes from Joe Ao Yong. Hopefully I didn't butcher your name. I apologize if I did. Along the lines of Jess's question, it's safe to say that everyone here has a tendency to be a perfectionist. Just maybe. The thought of not being able to devote 100% to work and or children comes across my mind. I see colleagues having to take time off with little notice because of their child falling ill, daycare germs. As a surgeon, my worry would be having to cancel surgeries and not being able to care for my patients. But at the same time, I would also have to prioritize my child if I had one. How did you all manage this? I'd love for Grace to talk about this first.
That's a great
Surgeon.
question. And it's a constant struggle. I'm still learning. So I would like to reinforce my background a little more because right now my family is in Taiwan, but I actually work in Hong Kong because there's no big specialty referral hospital, there's no job opening in Taiwan. And that being said, that I commute, I fly back and forth. I work in Taiwan for a week. I work in Hong Kong for a week and then back home for a week, something like that. It sounds tiring, but it's not easy. But I found that it's quite nice because that means that Kyle, my husband, and I, we have on-call schedule. When I'm at work, he's on call with the kid, and when I'm back home, I'm the legit full-time mom, and not have to like, do all the chores, do the mom thing. And then I find that it's pretty useful that to have an on-call duty. And when there are like days that we're just like both stuck at work, for example, if I'm in Hong Kong and then Kyle has to go out for a business trip, like we pre-arranged a nanny. So I feel like it's still not easy, but it would be nice that if you can find a good nanny. It's very important. And then also like, I'm very lucky I live close with my family, and my mom, all she wants to do is be a grandmom, so she can pick up kids if we are truly unavailable. So I have plan A, plan B. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does help to have family nearby if they're willing to help. How about you, Clara?
For me, that was definitely a tough part of being a new mom and having a young child in daycare who would get every daycare illness all the time. I definitely just had to learn to ask for help. And it was amazing to me how willing my colleagues were to step up and help me. And, one stretch of illness, my daughter had to be hospitalized, and immediately I just dropped everything. I was meant to be on clinics, and as soon as she fell ill enough and we had to go to hospital, and she was there actually for 2 weeks, I turned my phone. I called my best friend. I said, please just help me figure this out. And they did. They took over my schedule. They figured out all my patients. I did not have to look at my phone once, apart from when I was contacting people purposefully to let them know what was going on. And I am so grateful to have everybody there supporting me. But I think people also realize that you do have a child, and that's ultimately probably your priority, especially in a situation like that. And everybody was very understanding and very supportive.
How about you, Yui?
Well, I just went back to work part-time, this spring, so I don't really have a ton to add compared to Clara or Grace. But one of the things that I think as I'm going back in and dipping my toes deeper into work is the whole idea of I think we mentioned perfectionism here, and there's this whole concept in the parenting world called good enough parenting theory, and I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with it, but I think that can probably go into the work as well, in our work mindset about just being good enough. And good enough is awesome, because if good enough is still showing up and being empathetic to your child and also being empathetic to your patient, but also more than anything, being empathetic to yourself that you can't be perfect, then I think that's probably a good kind of mindset to have, to try and allow yourself to not be able to perform at work in the way that you want to because you need to prioritize your child, but you're still showing up for your child, which ultimately, like Clara said, is the priority. Because somebody else can do your job at work. And I don't like saying this because I pride my work so much and we've all worked so hard to be where we are today. But while somebody else can step in to do that surgery for me, if I have to be pulled out to tend to my child, no one can really be my child's parent or mom except myself. And yeah, I mean, if my mother lived close by, then that's great. It would be great to rely on her. But I think in my case, that's probably the mindset I would need to have, because I don't really have any family nearby. And I do have a part-time nanny, but her availability is limited. So yeah, that's what I can really add at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that the whole, work-life balance thing is really a misnomer, right? Because you're never actually balancing them both. You're doing one or you're doing the other. So yeah, I think one thing that really helped me throughout when Masao was young was definitely having a partner who was 50% all the way. So, thankfully our schedules are both more flexible than like a surgeon's or, clinicians would be. So he's a veterinary parasitologist. So one of us would always be able to drop everything and go get Masao if he was sick from daycare and that sort of thing. So I've very much appreciated having a partner who's both willing and able to do that. So, all right. So another question that we had prepared was, how do you feel your parenthood or motherhood has kind of affected how you approach work and your feelings towards work or your performance at work? Do you feel like it's changed since you've become a parent? Does anybody want to take this one first?
I guess I'm happy to maybe start off the discussion on this one. I think, and probably this has happened a little bit naturally, the older I've gotten better at saying no. Because I think, as you're building your career and early in your career, I think the answer is always yes, right? If somebody asks you to do something, the answer is yes. And I'm going to not only do it well, I'm going to do it really well, right? Is always the approach that I had. And soon you become known as the person to go to, right? So when people need something, if there's another commitment that they need somebody for, they come to you and you feel bad to say no. And then you sort of set yourself up, I guess, for that expectation of being this person that people can come to all the time. And so for me, becoming a mother, I definitely just got better at saying no and also just not feeling too bad about it. And not making excuses. At times I think you felt like I had to justify why I couldn't do this additional thing, or I couldn't take this project on, or I couldn't go fly across the country for this other seminar. And instead I've just gotten better at just being like, sorry, I just can't accommodate it at this time.
Any other comments from Grace or Yui?
I agree. I agree with Dr. Goh. Definitely like being a mom make me a little bit more caring, and because right now I'm still postpartum, so I'm more patient to the student. But I'm also getting better to say no and draw a boundary, because I found that it really worked for me when I say, because for me that drawing boundaries, that and then I say no, I don't have to give them the explanation. I just say no, I cannot make it. Then that's it. And so I can really like value my time, and I can be present. What I mean by be present is that I know that even I'm traveling back and forth, but when I'm home, I rarely check my phone, and then I put my phone in the room. I rarely have my phone on me, so I can really just like spend my time, like be present for my kids. And then even they're too little, but I think they know. I think that quality is over quantity. And so I feel like after that, I'm learning to be just like focus on that thing, and then just like Dr. Goh say, that there's no guilt of saying no, and then just like, is it too much on my plate? I can't do it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I echo what Clara and Grace both said about setting boundaries and learning to be able to say no. And I think on top of that, for me personally, I, being a veterinarian, used to kind of be this like big identity and purpose in life that I had. And it's still, definitely an important part of who I am. But ever since I had my daughter, I think that sort of focus has shifted a little bit more. And I think that actually does help me balance my ability to kind of manage my caseload or workload a little bit at work. Like today, for example, I was, working, and it's Saturday. So obviously everybody who couldn't come in on a weekday came in, and there were a couple sort of, you know, uh, just like walk-ins, and my schedule was already fully booked. And the only way that I could see the walk-ins was if I saw them, close to the end of the day, when the end of the day was already pretty packed itself, but there was just mostly like vaccines and things like that. Pre-baby, I would have been like as long as our texts are okay, yeah, let's just do them. Let's just figure it out. We could do this. But now I'm like, I don't know. It's like gonna be 5 p.m. My daughter needs to be fed. I miss her. I want to hang out with her before she goes to bed at 7:30. So, and we're all booked and the staff is tired. So I'm like, no, we're gonna say no to this. This is New York City. They can go to other urgent care or emergency hospital. One of them is just vomiting once and otherwise doing completely fine since yesterday. So we'll just not deal with it today. And as I'm saying this, I'm already feeling like this guilt. So I'm working on this actively right now. But I come home and I'm glad that I did that because I was able to come home to see her who's still awake. And everybody reminds me these moments are so precious that it just goes by so quickly. So I think that's kind of where I'm focusing on these days. Is I think that shift has really sort of helped me balance my ability to not say yes to everything and not let work take control of my entire life like it used to.
And for me, my perspective has really changed since the vet students are now about the same age, just a little bit older than my son, right? So I think that's made me more empathetic towards the students. I mean, not that I wasn't before, but because I see how he thinks and how he behaves and things that I think are weird that he does. But, I see his behavior in some of the vet students and I have a bit more patience for them and more empathy for them, I think, because of him. So we got a question from Dana. It says, how do your experiences as an AAPI parent and professional compare to those of others in our predominantly white profession? Does anybody want to take this?
I have to think about this for a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can start, I think, a little bit. I mean, definitely there's that sort of Asian workaholism stereotype. And, I saw that, right? As I was going through pre-tenure, I was the only one at work on a Saturday or Sunday, or, I would stay later. Well, I didn't stay later because I had my son, but I was working overall more hours than a lot of my colleagues. And I don't know if that was necessarily an AAPI thing, because there is a woman in my department who is white, but she is an empty nester and she's there more hours than I am, even when I was working 80-hour weeks. So, but still, there is that general drive that is very much sort of my dad's voice in my head speaking, that I had to silence after things got really bad and I was finding myself at a breaking point.
I would imagine, and the thing about this is it's hard to prove, because at the end of the day, you don't really know what people are thinking, or if there's any sort of issue, it's hard to tell if it's because of how, your racial presentation or something else. But the whole concept of bamboo ceiling, I do wonder, and on top of the glass ceiling, especially if you're a woman too, I do wonder that so a little backstory, but when I was a medical director for the telehealth startup, I actually lost my position 3 weeks postpartum. They just kind of cut out the entire position entirely. So that was a huge shock for me. And I then later on found out that the only other people who were cut off from, actually there was nobody else from sort of my level director position who was made redundant. I was the only one, but I was also one of the only other women in the entire sort of that level of director, and I was the only person of color at that point. The only other people who was also made redundant at that time, because it was a reduction in force due to financial issues, were all women working sort of like below my level. And it did make me wonder. And when I talked to some of my friends and my husband, a lot of them sort of brought up the fact that, well, maybe it's because you're female, or maybe it's because, you're Asian, or who knows? But it did make me wonder, and I don't really like dwelling on these things and feeling bitter, but if I was male or if I was, fully white, or fully white passing, then maybe I wouldn't have been made redundant. Who knows? So that's maybe something that comes to my mind when I think about this.
I'm so sorry, Yui. I didn't know about that. It sucks.
That's okay. It ended up being great because I ended up taking a very long maternity leave. But yeah, it was shocking at the time, but I've moved on since then.
Claire or Grace, do you have any comments on this?
I was very fortunate that I didn't get to I didn't have a lot of like a negative experience about being an API parent. I mean, at least like during my training in the United States, that the only thing I remember that because my whole faculty, the program, everyone was very supportive, and my resident mate, and then they're so happy that I'm API parents because that I'm willing to be on call for like Thanksgiving, Christmas, I don't care, as long as you give me break for Chinese New Year. So that worked out well.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, it's a very interesting question, and I would agree with the comments that have been made that, is it that you're Asian? Is it that you're a female? I'm an orthopedic surgeon, which I think in general I'm a bit of a rarity, or we're a bit of a rarity in that, it's very male dominated and very white male dominated sort of arena. So, whether it was pressure from being female, whether it was pressure from being Asian, I always felt like I did need to prove myself. And, adding to that, the challenge of then parenthood on top of it, they're all big challenges, right, in life. And so I don't know that I can really separate it out. But I think it made it tough, right, at times to figure out what my priorities were going to be. And I think one thing that I had an awesome mentor who was a white male surgeon, but a father and a great mentor. And as I was approaching parenthood, and I had questions about how to make everything work, and I think he echoed what Grace had mentioned before about just presence. He said, "You're not going to be able to do everything, and but whatever you do decide to do, pick and choose carefully and try to be present for whether that's for whatever you're doing at work, for whatever you're doing at home." And I think that was, wonderful advice that I've tried to take on board.
Yeah, I wish I had a mentor like that. I pretty much approached parenting as doing everything that the opposite of what my dad did. So he worked all the time, all week. He'd come home, eat dinner, and then go back to work in his office. He'd work on the weekends. The only time he really spent with me is if we were on vacation or holidays, that sort of thing. So I very much made it a point to, after I picked Masao up at daycare, we go home, and that was family time. And yeah, and the whole tiger parenting thing, like I absolutely refuse to do that. And so we probably went the opposite direction. We were probably a little bit too lenient, but our son turned out okay. So I think it's all right. So Dana also asked, that she was curious about that question because parenthood is a frequent topic in our professional community, thankfully. However, do you think the advice often shared applies to us? Are there any funny little cultural nuances you've seen that make our experiences unique? Any thoughts? I mean, I think the tiger parenting concept definitely is unique to a lot of Asian cultures.
Yes, yes, bring up Tiger Mom because I was known to be a grumpy resident, and every we have students all the time, right? And then when they look at schedule, oh, and they want to check who's the faculty on, who's the house officer, and I heard that the students are afraid that when I'm on their clinic schedule, and I don't understand why. But I do have expectation for the student that every morning you need to have your treatment sheet ready. You need to tell me your treatment plan. And then that you don't want to change fluid, you want to change drug because of what? Justify your reason. And I remember there's ones that I had a male student, he didn't complete the ICU flow sheet, and then in the morning when I check on patient, and I was pretty upset and say, why didn't you do this? I didn't yell at him, I would just like show him, I just stared at him with, like I'm disappointed. And then I made him cry. So he went to the bathroom and cried. I was like, okay, you go cry. So I was just holding the ICU flow sheet, like standing outside of the male's bathroom and waiting for him to get out. And then once it's out, I say, okay, I need you to explain, why are you okay with this blood pressure? Do you think 60 is normal? And then because of that, my faculty happened to see it. So he pulled me away and said, Grace, it's your Asian Tiger Mom thing. It's United States. So just chill. So after that, I kind of like pull back a little bit.
Oh, I love that story. You definitely remind me of my mum, and I could definitely see for sure that side of thing. I would agree. I think I do have high expectations as a result of growing up in this culture, and yeah, I think that is something which I don't not just maybe hold my own child perhaps to, but perhaps also my students as well. So I don't think I've made that many people cry, but certainly I can, I think, be a little bit intimidating. But no, I mean, I think yeah, what is unique to our culture, I think it is the expectations thing, right? And even though I grew up in Australia and I've lived in the States a long time, and I do sort of try and read all the good parenting blogs and whatnot, their philosophies are very different. When you look at the Asian culture and you look at the Australian or American culture or parenting methods. Hopefully I'm not going to be a tiger mum to my daughter, but I think I hopefully that there's a bit of a happy medium, right? I mean, I think there's something very, very that I'm proud of in our culture, that we are hardworking, that we have a very strong work ethic, which I don't think is a bad thing necessarily. But I also want to balance that with also being a very supportive mother, and not necessarily being having all my expectations put onto my child, I guess.
Yeah, one of the topics that I often see on like social media about parenting, and maybe this kind of falls in line with mentoring new interns if you're a board certified specialist. Grace, is like the whole idea of gentle parenting, which is like a heated topic amongst a lot of people that I know. And some of the things that I've come across sort of directly conflicts with the Asian style parenting that I'm used to, that I was raised in, that a lot of my, friends were raised in as well. And I think the other thing is, and this is maybe specifically a Japanese thing, but we're very much about, actually, no, this is a Chinese thing too. We're very much about like caring for the collective rather than the individual, and always thinking about the collective rather than the individual. And I think maybe that's one of the things that are different between like a lot of our white colleagues who might be more sort of individualistic in their thinking, in their parenting style, in their work style, versus an Asian parent who's also working might be thinking more in the collective style as well. I don't know if I'm kind of going a little bit off topic here, but I do feel like maybe there's a bit of a cultural nuance there in the way that we work. Because I do often sort of feel responsible. I don't know, I could be completely wrong, but I do sometimes feel like I need to present a certain way and act a certain way for the collective good. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm kind of losing everybody here.
No, I totally get that. Like we touched on asking people for help earlier, but I very much would feel bad or guilty asking for help, especially last minute, for somebody to pick up, my duty or something like that. Unless, I could very clearly swap with somebody and pay them back, sort of thing. And it would have been hard for me to ask. I mean, we were very lucky because we have a great village here, as like a parental village. We're very good friends with all the parents of our kids' friends. And so that is definitely something that I would recommend if you haven't done that already. So yeah, making sure that you have a big support network is so key to surviving early parenthood for sure. But yeah, don't know how the Asian thing affects that so much, except for I'm less likely to ask for help than I am to give it, for sure. Okay. Another question we had prepared was, are there any unique challenges that veterinary professionals face when balancing the demands of parenting with their work responsibilities? So sort of getting away from the AAPI side, but anything unique to being a veterinarian?
I'll go first. I think the biggest challenge for our profession is the unpredictable hours if you're a clinician. It's just that sometimes we get to have a good day and then we get to leave on time, but there are definitely days that we just get stuck with last minute walk-in emergency, or like one of the patients that didn't do well and so didn't get to leave the hospital until like 9, 10, 11, sometimes over midnight. Then the struggle is who's going to pick up the kids, who's going to prep the dinner, give them bath, and put them to sleep. Though that's by far the biggest challenge, I think. So that's why it's very important to have an on-call schedule.
Yeah, I think I would add that it seems like, in the veterinary profession, you're also asked to wear many hats, even though we have a job title. A lot of the time you're doing a lot more than that, right? With work, you're not just the surgeon. You are helping to tech a lot of the time, or you have teaching responsibilities if you're part of a academic institution, or you sort of have a lot of facets of work that you can't always leave at work, right, as well. So sometimes even when you have left work, you may get called, or you may, have a project that you're working on outside of work. So for me, I think it is a little bit unique to the veterinary profession, in that, yeah, it's harder to leave work at work.
Yeah, I agree with exactly what both Clara and Grace said. And then just to kind of add on, I do also think that what also makes this profession unique and challenging as a parent is because we go into work and it's not like we're doing a desk job, just staring at a computer screen all day, where especially if you're in clinical, you're dealing with a lot of people's raw emotions. At times they can be really negative and they can be thrown at you. And so when you have a particularly difficult day, like maybe there was a lot of euthanasias you had to do, or a lot of complex cases that ended up, not having the outcome that you desired, clients arguing with you about a plan, or the cost of certain things, which is also a big thing in the US especially. I think it's definitely a challenge to then try to leave all of that at work and not bring it home and not let it affect your interaction with your children. And I think one of the reasons why I'm kind of dragging my feet on just kind of doing this relief work for now is because as much as I would love to kind of go back full time, I am also very apprehensive and worried about burning out. So I don't have an answer, and I don't know if Clara or Grace might have an answer to how to balance that, but that's definitely sort of a theme of mine that's constantly in my head about when, I do end up going back full time, and I'll probably, take on a medical director position for a clinic, which is sort of the step up from what I'm doing now. My big question is, how am I going to balance all of this? Yeah, so I'm actually, I do want to ask Clara and Grace if you guys have any advice for that.
I guess I can maybe speak a little bit to that. I think to some degree, it comes back to setting your own boundaries and for myself, like even simple things like if I am answering emails, after my daughter's gone to bed, so it may be like, 10, 11, 12, 1 a.m. at night that I finally get to tackling some of these emails that either a client has sent me or another clinician or whoever. I may type out my reply at that time, but I actually won't send it until 9 a.m. the next day when I'm at work. And so so that sets up a little bit of an expectation of, okay, well, she's only going to answer my emails between 9 and 5 hours, right? So it's already sort of establishes a little bit of that boundary of, okay, I'm not available via email 24/7. And same thing from a phone call perspective. There are times where, yes, I'm meant to be available and on call, and I will have my phone on me at all times. But otherwise, I may not answer that call right away. Even though I see it ringing, I see that it's somebody from work, I'm not on call. I may listen to the voicemail, but then again, I'm going to choose whether I'm going to call that person back right away. And majority of the time, I'm actually going to wait till the next working day, and then I'm going to answer it then at that point in time. So it's sort of establishing a very clear working boundary to some degree. The emotional toll is I think a tough one. And yeah, there are times where, yes, you've had a really rough day, a hard day, emotionally draining. I have complete empathy fatigue at this point in time. And what do? I try to give myself a little time and space. And so whether that's, I need to go have a drink with a good girlfriend. I'm gonna, if I can't do that right away, maybe I'll schedule it, right? I'm going to schedule this special time for myself. Maybe I'm going to go to a yoga class or something like that. And this is something that I am going to gift myself. And even if I can't do it right away, I'm going to schedule it as into my schedule, put it on my calendar so that I have that to look forward to, and know that that is going to be time for me to decompress, and then hopefully I can, just let that go, take a deep breath and walk into whatever I have to do next.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's actually really helpful. And it sounds like the main sort of thing to watch out for and to protect is like your space and having that space. Because I was thinking you have to jump from work immediately to your baby, but I think it's like you give yourself a buffer in between, give yourself that time and the space to just be you, not a vet, not a mom, but just you as who you were. So that's actually really inspiring. I'm going to remember that. Thank you so much.
It's so important to find something that fills your cup, right? Otherwise, you're not going to be a good mom or a vet or, good spouse, whatever, if you don't fill your cup. Grace, did you have anything else to add?
No, I want to say that that's very inspiring. I'm going to remember that as well because I'm also still learning.
Well, we are at the top of the hour, a little over. Do you guys have any last words of advice? I think most of the folks on the call are, vet students or recent grads. So anything you want to leave them with to take away from this webinar?
I'll go first. Even I don't know, like there's a lot to say, but I think the take-home message, take-home note for this is that if you're struggling, that's okay. Be vulnerable, ask for help, and know that it is just temporary. It's not gonna last forever. You will get through it.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, one, I'd encourage all of you guys out there to you don't have to choose between your dream career and your dream family life. I do feel like you can have it all. I think you have to just set really good boundaries. And the advice that I got from my mentor was yeah, like don't try and be 100% at too many things, right? But be present for the select things that you're going to choose to do, and be mindful about that, your choices, and be present when you can be.
Yeah, I love that. I think the only thing I can really add, because Clara and Grace has already sort of hit the nail, is that take your time, because if you guys are still vet students and I'm assuming you're in your 20s, although maybe you guys are in your 30s, which is also really cool, and that's totally fine too. Take your time and don't rush into trying to like have this perfect idea in your mind about how your life should be, because when you rush into things and you sometimes you get disappointed when things don't go the way you wanted to, or you might end up making decisions that you possibly might regret later in life. So try to just be present, take it slow, be intentional with the choices you make. And I this can kind of come off irresponsible when I say it like this, but life will kind of work itself out in a sense. And then lastly, it's okay, and I remind this to myself all the time, it's okay to shift your priorities depending on what life stage you are. Right now, my priority is my daughter, but in, a couple months or a year or a couple years, it might be my job for a little bit, or it might just be back and forth. And I think Kaori said it too, but balance is not your pendulum is like perfectly in balance all the time. It's always going to be this, and kind of figuring out how to kind of balance this and it doesn't tip over the edge too much. So yeah.
And I guess my take-home messages would be, right, finding what fills your cup, and then also finding your people, right, both at work and in your parenting life, that you can reach out to as your support network. It's so important to have folks that you can ask for help, and then try not to feel too guilty, although the Asian guilt is strong. So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar today. Please check out this QR code if you would like to be put into the raffle for the Figs gift card. It's just a short survey that will give us some feedback. Oh, can you leave it up there, Daniel? Where to go for folks? Yeah, and it'll give us some feedback on how we did. So we would love to hear from you. Again, thank you guys. Thank Yui, Clara, and Grace so much for joining us today, for your candidness and for sharing. Really enjoy getting to know you guys better.
Same here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, hopefully everybody got the QR code.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me for this panel. It was really lovely to meet you guys.
Yeah, lovely to meet you too. I hope that we can meet in person at some point, like maybe at AVMA or something.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed it.
I know it's
Claire-
sad. This is like the most I've interacted with you, and you were UGA the whole time.
I know.
That's really sad.
We had a really brief, like, like online webinar when I was a
Mhm.
resident, but it was very brief. So I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Oh, Clara, if one day I get to see you in ACVS, please like stop by. I'd like to say hi
Yes,